Hi, my name is Marissa Taylor. I am a student at Indiana University Bloomington, and I am a Spanish education major with the English as a New Language License Edition. This is my final project for a class I took in Navajo Studies, and I'm completing this project after spending a week out on the Navajo reservation. So the topics I'm going to cover include the experiences and viewpoints I had both prior to and after the trip, which include news perspectives on teaching language and culture and connecting with students from different backgrounds, and also application. So what am I taking away from this trip? Teaching strategies, putting myself in the shoes of my future students, things like that. So first I want to start off by talking about some of the expectations I had before the trip versus how it actually went when I got there. So first off, traditional clothing. I had this expectation that there was going to be a lot of traditional clothing worn while I was there. But I was actually surprised. A lot of people were just wearing everyday clothing like you would see anywhere else in the United States, to be honest. It seemed like the regalia type things are reserved for special occasions. For example, like the powwow at IU, the sports banquet at the elementary school we went to in Navajo Mountain. People were slightly more dressed up, not quite regalia for that, but it was a more traditional way of dressing up, and it was cool to see. I also expected this sense of resentment towards the white man, just because that seemed like something that would be logical after everything that happened between the long walk and Bosque Redondo and things like that. But I was pleasantly surprised. I had no negative experiences with people at all. Everyone was extremely welcoming. I did not feel outcasted or separated by the color of my skin from anybody. And it was an attitude of, okay, yes, what happened in history happened, but, that doesn't mean that's how it has to continue. And we can, they were able to forgive that history and move forth and be welcoming and just so genuinely kind and excited that we wanted to learn about their culture. And it was a beautiful thing. And I really think more people in this country should take that advice and really focus on what unites us and not what separates us, and just show love, respect, compassion, welcoming nature to everybody, and just be curious, want to learn respectfully about everyone. It was just a beautiful thing to see. I think I expected more references from the excerpts in class. Like we talked about, we don't talk about snakes. We do talk about the four sacred mountains, things like that. People seem to be absolutely fine talking about snakes. I mean, Dee Dee, the guy at Two Great Hills, Mr. Bodoni, would just throw it out there like it's nothing. So that was odd, but I assume people from different places who believe a little bit differently would not be okay with that in that same way. So I just think that was interesting, though, to see that counteraction of that point. And then the Four Sacred Mountains, the students at Tawali were doing a project on it, when we arrived. So that's something that's very important, and they talk about the mountains very highly, even the kids do. And then also the clan introductions were so important at every school. And also just because I'm a politically minded person, I expected there to be some sort of like distinct method with their politics. No, it was the complete opposite. These politics almost mirrored what I see in modern politics outside of the reservation in the US. Like, the chapter house felt like a town hall meeting. Like, it literally looked like my town hall on the inside and ran the same way. And it was just crazy to see. And in my mind, I was like, this feels wrong. Like, this just doesn't feel right. And after talking to Mr. Bodoni, he kind of said, yeah, that doesn't always fit. He said it can feel awkward, and in his opinion, it's not exactly what they need to meet their needs. They did it on their own just fine before they had to do it this way. And I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions on that. But it was interesting to hear it from his perspective as someone who has lived there his whole life. So yeah. And then we were able to discuss that in depth, and he even showed me a video of Russell Means, who is a Navajo man, testifying with the Senate about a lot of issues in 1989, and it's a really good video. I recommend it to anyone who wants to know more about Native Americans and their struggles and, what they're advocating for. Really well spoken, great video, enjoyed it a lot, and I'm really glad he shared that with me. So we kind of talk about teaching language and culture, this time with Ella. Ella teaches elementary school students. They do things like reciting the alphabet, things like that that you always see to start with. And I even found myself starting to pick up on some of it because she had this semi-immersion-esque style of teaching that was really cool to witness and be a part of. And she adapts these activities for different grade levels. She has students whose parents don't want their kids in this at all, which was kind of shocking to me. But this does not seem to affect her yearning to teach other children at all. She respects their decision, moves forth with what she thinks is really important and crucial for these kids, and I think that just says so much about her character and how giving and loving she is towards these kids. And it kind of opened my eyes up to thinking maybe I would want to teach younger kids in the future, because it was just really cool to see kids that little learning so much about language and culture, and I think it's something I'll definitely consider moving forward. And then I kind of looked at language and culture from Mr. Bodoni's side in the high school. He had a method of teaching that was a lot less hands-on. He kind of let the students lead the class themselves, which is odd. It's not something I'd seen before. But again, I was only there for one day. He may not do that every day. I don't know. But Bodoni also includes culture in his classes, but it's not really as effective as the real experiences he gave to us. Like, even when we as a group went to his house, it just, between the food we sampled and the humor and the openness he had, it was just felt more effective because it was interactive. It was right there. I mean, you were part of it. But on that note, Mr. Bodoni was the kind of person that I needed on this trip to make me buy in and believe and get what I needed out of it. I'm like a very practical, okay, let's cut this polite stuff. Let's get down to what actually matters. Like, and I'm sure people in the group thought this. He was blunt about how he felt and, how they were wronged and this, that, and the other. And it's all valid. Anything he says is valid. So I think hearing it from him, and even outside of the group conversation, we had a really long, like hour and a half one-on-one conversation at the school. Listening to him talk, blunt, lays it out for you, doesn't sugarcoat it, tells you how he feels, and that may not be how everybody feels, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel the same way he does. I loved it. Did I agree exactly with everything he said? Maybe not. But you have to admit, there's validity to that. He lives it. So, he was cool. I mean, I just loved talking to him. He was so interesting. He was open about his perspective. You could ask him anything. And I honestly, did I think he was the best teacher? Probably not. And I only saw him for a day, so maybe I can't say that. But you could tell he genuinely cares about his culture and his students, and I think that's what matters. So there's a lot to be seen, right? So we leave the reservation, what now? Well, a lot of students seem to care about their culture. But from what I'm picking up, modern culture has influenced their dedication to its practices. And this is what I'm being told from elders and teachers and even the students themselves. The elders talk about students being unaware of a lot of the politics and the political aspects that's happening within their Navajo Nation because they're focused on social media, video games, and other technologically based reasons. And honestly, that's probably 100% true, because I think you see this a lot with students outside the reservation, not knowing what's going on in politics or choosing to be apolitical. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, but I think that contributes to some of the loss of culture, pride, and language that's starting to happen in the Navajo Nation. And the young people even openly admit, like, our language is dying, and they know it. But I just didn't feel like it was becoming a priority, and a lot of the elders agreed with me on that sentiment, that it wasn't a priority for them. And 20, 30 years from now, we'll see how that turns out. I don't know, I can't predict it. So application. So I learned a lot about how to add value to learning about a culture when people are hesitant about it. Like, these children were a direct part of this culture that they're trying to teach them about, and they still didn't seem like they were invested or like they were interested a lot of the time. And these teachers really, they're trying hard. They're incorporating examples from history, their own lives, daily life, to try and make this more relevant. I think that's what it's about when you teach culture. How can I convince my students this matters and show them that this really happens and this is relevant in their world? And I think that's the key, and I really honed in on what that means during this trip. I was also reminded how intimidating language learning can be. This is the first time that I've been thrown in a situation since my freshman year of high school where I've started learning a language and know nothing and might get behind, might be scared, intimidated. You know, I'm sitting there with kindergartners trying to learn some of the Diné language, and they know way more than I do, and it's humbling. I mean, and it puts you in the shoes of those students and the students I'll be teaching Spanish to, and reminds you, okay, you got to be patient, you have to be understanding, because not everyone's going to pick this stuff up at the same pace. And it was again something I will take from this trip that I don't think I could have gotten without going. It's a great reminder of how it is. Resources. Oh, the newspaper article, like the one you see in the picture from Mr. Berdoni's room. The video I mentioned earlier of Russell Means testifying to the Senate that he shared with me. He also shared with me a paper source of the different clans listed and how it works, how they present the clans, and things like that. And he kind of mentioned to me, you know, they do this in some of the Hispanic Spanish culture. And I was like, oh, well, this would be great for a compare and contrast. And I use this to talk about it with my students because they may not hear anything about Native Americans if I don't tell them. So I just think it's a cool opportunity, and there are resources I will use. Finally, how do I utilize what I learned for equity? The one thing all teachers, it doesn't matter what you're teaching, what grade, can learn from this trip is that no matter what the kid's background is, kids are kids. You know, of course they have differences between them, but they have similarities that are characteristic of all children, right? They're curious, they're willing to learn, they have these social tendencies. Like when I first sit down, yeah, it's kind of awkward, but then 5-10 minutes later, we're kind of talking and it feels less awkward and they open up and I open up and it becomes a better conversation. All kids do that. That's how that is. So I just think a lot of times people would take kids like these Native American students and put them in a different category. And personally, I see it all the time with ENL students that come into a class and they don't speak English, and teachers put them in this category like they're an alien and they don't know, you know, anything about them. And students can sense that, man. I mean, you may not speak their language, but body language can say a lot. Actions can speak louder than words, and students like these, or students like the ENL students, they deserve, you know, compassion and interactive things, you know, to get them engaged, because kids are kids. And I think if people were reminded of that and could see that, you know, they would be able to treat a lot of students from a lot of different backgrounds, whether it's financially, racially, ethnically, religiously. Just treat them with respect, genuine care. You know, what is it really, when you get down to it, that makes a kid in Monroe County different than a kid on the Navajo reservation? They're both kids, and they deserve the equitable opportunity. And I think when you experience it, you can actually see it, and you can learn more about how to improve that in your own school, classroom, and community. And then also, these social political issues surrounding education, they're present everywhere. I see it on Monroe County like I do in the Navajo reservation, like I'm sure it's happening in other places around the country and the world. You know, districts have trouble with staffing, finances, creating these equitable opportunities for children. And it's something talked about a lot with that is Wi-Fi. And they have that issue on the reservation too. So while the issues might be heightened in places like the Navajo reservation, these are common issues that happen everywhere. So, okay, no matter what we do, I don't think we're going to get it to a place where it's perfectly equitable, because the definition of that changes constantly, right? But I think looking at an example like this, you can start saying, okay, what are the little things I can do to make this more equitable? What can I pay attention to more? What can I think about in a different way to try and, you know, keep these opportunities equitable? And, you know, a lot of teachers have different ways of maintaining peace of mind, self-care, and keeping this passion for education. But I think the common denominator we all have is that we all have these aspirations for our kids where we want them to succeed, and that's how we're all the same. So if we focus on that, I think creating these equitable environments becomes more and more doable. And just to conclude, you know, all in all, this trip is something I'll never forget. I flew for the first time, I met great people, I grew as a person, I gained skills that I'll use in my future as an educator, and I got to do it all with some of my closest friends. I mean, people that are also educators, they get it. We can talk to each other every day about what we're experiencing. And it's just a beautiful experience that most people will probably never get to have. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to go, and I'm thankful that I made the decision to go. It was out of my comfort zone, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. So, thank you.